So as I said, if you are joining us, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. That would be great, but we can get going in a second. Thank you, Beverly, for the introduction as well from sunny London. Hello from sunny Brussels here too. All right, let's get going with today's webinar, and then everyone could join. So yeah, like I said, good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today's webinar, we've got a super interesting lineup. I think it'd be really fascinating, sort of 4 different excellent speakers presenting today, and then we'll have obviously some chance for Q&A at the end. So this is the webinar on how to finance zero waste cities. This webinar is just one part of our ongoing Zero Waste Europe live webinar semesters. They happen once a month from October to June every year, and we sort of cover different topics related to zero waste issues. And for those that don't know who we are, so we are Zero Waste Europe. We're a Brussels-based NGO working on advocacy at the EU level to push for ambitious European Union waste legislation. We also, via our network of member organizations across Europe, push and support municipalities at the local level to help them transition towards zero waste, one community at a time. My name is Jack McQuibben, and I'm the Zero Waste Cities Program Coordinator at Zero Waste Europe. And the Zero Waste Cities Program is dedicated to really help cities and communities transition towards zero waste. We bring together a European platform of knowledge on local stakeholders on how to implement zero waste best practices, the benefits these bring, and the range of different diverse contexts that they can be applied. We also sort of mentor and recognize municipalities as well via their work that they do towards zero waste at the local level. But today's webinar is a really important topic because many European municipalities today, I think, are aware of the need to implement zero waste and the importance that these strategies and solutions bring, given the urgency of the environmental crises that we're facing. Yet, when it comes to practical implementation, often one of the biggest barriers local authorities face is simply accessing adequate financial resources to implement zero waste solutions. And so whilst there is growing evidence that showcases how beneficial these zero waste strategies can be, how they can help save money, in particular, investment in the right infrastructure and human resources that's often required to get going is sometimes lacking and differs depending on countries and regions as well. So from the EU to central banks, from extended producer responsibility schemes to private capital, there are several different sources of funding available for municipalities today. And yet each of these sources remain sometimes opaque, not very transparent, and inaccessible to most European municipalities. So this is why we're hosting this webinar today, basically, to really examine the benefits and challenges each of these funding sources provide, to hear from cities themselves about how they funded their local strategies, and to hear from some other creative ideas, new solutions to really help accelerate the transition to zero waste at the local level. So super important topics today, and I think we're really looking at the relevant partners as well within the finance world that municipalities can and should be working with to help finance the transition towards zero waste. We have 4 excellent speakers today from 4 different countries. I will save the specific introductions for when they join, but just so you're aware of the format, for each speaker they will present for 8 or 9 minutes. And then after that presentation, we will have a direct Q&A with the speaker for a similar sort of 5 or 6 minutes. And then after the 4 presentations of that format, we will have a joint Q&A with all the speakers and a discussion at the end. Regarding participation, you will see there is a Q&A toolbox at the bottom of your screen here. So just say, if you have a question for our speakers, please type it in there. We'd love to relay these to the speakers, of course. Likewise, if you're watching from YouTube and watching this live, you can type in your question via the chat box on YouTube. Via the magic of modern technology, it will work its way back to me. I can put it to our speakers. But yes, and if you have sort of anything else, please share it in the chat box. We will be sharing links throughout as well that are relevant to what has been mentioned in the speaker's presentation. I think that's it, really. So questions in the Q&A box throughout. I will sort of moderate these as well. So thank you to everyone who's already sort of signed in and said hello. Let's get started with our first speaker. So Victor Mitians is the head of waste prevention and planning services at the Area Metropolitana de Barcelona. He's a biologist and environmentalist and specializes in waste management from a transformative perspective. After working as an environmental technician in the local administration, Victor went on to work as a project manager and steward manager for the Rosero Foundation. In his capacity, he participated in the drafting of municipal waste prevention plans, various studies on waste prevention, waste management and producer responsibility schemes. And from there, since 2017, he's been the head of waste prevention and planning services for the whole area of Barcelona. So, Victor, I hand the floor over to you to share your screen and give our first presentation of today.
Okay, thank you very much for inviting me. As Jack has already said, I have a background on activism, so I was involved in certain zero waste working groups and so on. And when the Zero Waste Europe invited me to explain how do we fund zero waste strategies in the Barcelona metropolitan area, I hesitated a little bit because there is no magic wand. And but Jack convinced me that even explaining how our funding works, it's important for other zero waste municipalities. So here I go. Maybe you don't know, but the metropolitan area of Barcelona, it's a second level administration that works with 36 municipalities that surround the city of Barcelona itself. It's 3.2 million inhabitants, and it's located in the northeast part of the Iberian Peninsula in Spain. And well, it's quite tricky because the metropolitan area of Barcelona, the AMB, has competences on waste treatment, whereas the municipalities have competences on collection. Okay, so we have different funding. The metropolitan area of Barcelona has well, first of all, let me explain you a little bit how is the waste management model in the metropolitan area of Barcelona. Mostly, the collection is done via containers in the roads or in the curbside. So it's 5 different colors: yellow for lightweight packaging, green for glass, blue for paper and cardboard, and brown for bio-waste. Kitchen waste mostly. And then we have the gray, which is for mixed waste. Sadly, 2/3 of the waste that we collect as of now come through the gray bin. Okay. We have 2 municipalities that collect via door-to-door systems. And then we have also a network of drop-off sites. Okay. When the waste is collected, it's sent to different facilities according to the waste type. We have 4 MBT treatment plants. These are marked with this kind of E. And then we have some smaller composting facilities. We have also a couple of lightweight packaging sorting facilities. And all of these, the collection and the treatment is funded via 2 main resources. One is the collection tax, but not all the municipalities in the metropolitan area have such a tax. Okay, 80% of the population, including the city of Barcelona, since last year, have collection tax. But 20% of the population, which are 12 municipalities, these are highlighted in red, doesn't have such a tax. Okay, so they fund the collection system via the general budget, and that's a problem. That's a problem from the environmental point of view, because for us, the tax is not only a funding system, but also an instrument of environmental policy. And if you don't have a tax, it's a problem because you cannot help people through the tax to have a more environmental behavior. Okay.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yep.
Do you have presentation slides? I'm not quite sure if you were sharing. We cannot see them.
Yeah. Am I? Am I not sharing?
If you want to.
Sorry about that, because we
here we go.
checked before. Okay.
Wonderful.
So I was sure that that you were seeing my presentation. Sorry about that.
No problem.
Okay, but yeah, if you want. Okay. So, and then we have the treatment tax. The treatment tax, it's used to fund these MBT facilities. And if you see at the expenses and income, you see that most of the expenses are the mixed waste treatment. So passing it through the MBT treatment and trying to send to recyclers materials such as metal, plastic, cardboard, even glass, and then try to stabilize the bio-waste that is not collected. This mostly the mixed waste treatment. And it costs more than a half of the total expenses budget. Okay. Then if you see, I have highlighted here in this kind of orange, the cost of bio-waste treatment. Okay. And if you see it, the bio-waste treatment has also income from an instrument that we will see later, which is called the disposal fee. That is an instrument set by the Catalan government. Okay, the Catalan government has a disposal fee that applies to landfilling and waste-to-energy facilities, and helps funding separate collection for waste streams such as bio-waste or others. And we also have another income that is highlighted in blue. That is, it comes from scrap, okay, from producer responsibility schemes, collective producer responsibility schemes. That applies to mainly packaging, glass, plastic, paper, and cardboard, but also to WEEE and to batteries. Okay, so we have a total expense of 182 million euro per year and an income of 45 million per year. And this, the 137 million that are the net costs, are shared between household tax, which amounts about 70% of the overall net cost, and then commercial tax, which is 30% of the collection of the net costs. Okay. The waste disposal fee. I think that this is quite, for us, this is the one of the most important instruments that we have. Why? Because it creates an extra cost on disposal for us, for local administration, and also represents an extra income for those municipalities that have a good separate collection system. Okay, as you can see, most of the collection, it's about 3/3 comes from landfilling, which is the main disposal option in Catalonia, and then 1/4 comes from waste-to-energy facilities. Okay, but 96% of what is collected through this disposal fee goes back to municipalities to help them fund the collection and the treatment of separate collected waste. Okay, mostly to bio-waste. If you can see, 73% of the overall collected goes to the treatment of bio-waste, which is very important because it helps municipalities to deploy a network of bio-waste treatment facilities, be it methanization or composting or whatever. And it also funds the stabilization of bio-waste that it's not properly collected. So via dirty composting and this kind of treatments. And it also helps municipalities fund collection of some streams that do not have producer responsibility schemes. For instance, this textile collection, which is a modest amount, but still it's an income for municipalities, or for instance, paper and cardboard collection. About 40% of what we collect in the blue bins is its packaging, and it's covered by the scraps. But 60% it's graphic paper and it's other products that don't have this scrap coverage. So having an income through the waste disposal fee, I think it's very important for municipalities because they carry the burden of the collection and treatment costs. There are also some hazardous waste management costs that are covered through the disposal fee. And this is quite interesting. Hopefully, in the coming years, we will have more scrap schemes. But as of now, what we have is packaging, glass, batteries, accumulators, drugs that is collected through the network of how do you say that, chemists, I think, waste, and then some smaller streams that are not that important in the municipal waste stream. But today, the Senate of Spain is discussing the creation of textile scrap and also furniture scrap, which possibly in 3 years' time will be also giving some money for municipalities to collect and treat these waste streams. And when it comes to prevention, there is no fixed funding. So you have to negotiate with your politicians in order to get some budget every year to finance waste prevention, but not in the disposal fee and not also in the scrap concepts. There is an amount to finance waste prevention fee, which I think it's a pity. But this is how our budget and how do we fund our prevention, collection, and treatment activities. I think that's it. That's an overall view of our funding system, and I give the floor to the next speaker.
Yeah, Victor. Thank you so much for that really informative presentation. That's full of super useful information about the situation in Barcelona. We just have a couple of minutes questions with you, if that's okay, to delve a bit deeper. And please, participants, if you have a question, feel free to submit it to the Q&A box. But I will use the moderator privilege to ask you one, Victor, that I have here, or several. But you mentioned the collection fees for citizens of the area of Barcelona. So only 80% of the population pay these currently, but how was the fee set in terms of how did you set the price? Is there the possibility, it was mentioned here in the chat, about what we see is these pay-as-you-throw schemes, right, where the fees there's a fixed part and a variable part, so you try to incentivize obviously lower waste reduction, a lower waste generation. But is that possible in Barcelona too as well?
Yeah, I didn't mention one of the key political tools that we have as of now, which is called the Municipal Agreement Towards Zero Waste, which is an agreement that from the metropolitan area we steered, and we convinced municipalities to commit themselves to have a minimal change in their waste collection systems. That involves that in 2025 there will be no open bins. We assume that the current voluntary collection system has reached its ceiling. So we want to get over the 40% collection ratio that we have right now, and that they have to change to either door-to-door collection or smart bins for at least mixed waste and bio waste. Okay, so we can control who participates in which collection stream, and then there is the second commitment, that is that in 2025 all of the municipalities will have a collection tax, and this tax will not be pay as you throw, because pay as you throw, you can only do it through door-to-door collection schemes, but bonification, so reduction of the tax according to your participation in bio-waste collection. Okay, so the more you participate, the less you pay. It's an approach, and it's a minimum agreement that we could reach with municipalities. So what we are now working with municipalities is how to create a collection tax that includes a variable part that can even be zero if you participate, let's say, twice or thrice per week in bio-waste collection. And how do we convert the current existing taxes that can be flat fee or modulated fee according to the surface of the flat or whatever, and how do we transition these fees, this existing tax, to this more pay-as-you-throw scheme?
Interesting. Yeah, thank you so much for that answer. It's a new system. It's very interested to see how the results come or go in a couple of years. But yeah, thank you, Victor. That's really fascinating. We have one final question for you, if that's okay. It's from Victor Brunster, about more of the prevention side of things. So you mentioned there at the end about funding for waste prevention measures is a bit more difficult, and you're sort of working with the Catalan regional government, which has been has a very ambitious waste prevention strategy, we should add here. But there is, if, for example, businesses wanted to use or make use of sort of reusable packaging schemes, or they wanted to apply for funding, how does the system work with the area of Barcelona? Is it sort of, how do you operate for waste prevention financing models? Is this sort of a case-by-case basis? Do you have grants or schemes? Or maybe a bit of an overview, perhaps, if you can, in a couple of minutes.
Yeah, when it comes to commercial waste, in certain areas of the cities, they have door-to-door collection schemes, and these door-to-door collection schemes are based on a public price. And this public price is modulated, and you pay more for mixed waste, and you pay less or even zero for separate collection. So there is a certain pay-as-you-throw scheme that promotes waste prevention, but still, I think that the tax, although it can help, it's not the best way to promote waste prevention. I mean, waste prevention activities, sadly, in the commercial area at least, it's even cheaper to produce waste, to use throwaway products than the savings that you get from any pay-as-you-throw scheme that you can set in a city. Because I guess it's the same in all the municipalities, but a tax cannot be higher than what it costs to collect and treat waste. So that makes it difficult for a tax to be a really effective instrument for waste prevention. It can be an effective instrument for promoting a good separate collection, but not that much for waste prevention.
Exactly. It's one of the sort of tools available sort of at the disposal of municipalities to help really tackle waste prevention. There is one final question, I know I said that before, in the Q&A box about, just very quickly, on the variable plan for collection tax that you just mentioned. The aim is for private actors, businesses, or it's focused on the municipalities of the area of Barcelona?
The reduction of the tax?
The collection tax you mentioned before about the variability, it's for household businesses, or it's going to be set at the municipal level?
This is currently under discussion, but we aim that the collection tax start with this kind of modulation fee, and then the treatment tax comes later when we see the results. And yeah, I didn't mention one thing, but of course, one of the difficulties that we have in the metropolitan area is that a better collection system increases costs for municipalities, whereas a better results in collection decreases cost of treatment. So we as A and B have benefits and the municipalities have increasing cost. So we have also set an agreement between municipalities and us that our savings will become also their income, at least for some years. And we try to help municipalities economically to deploy the new waste collection systems. And after that, we will see what we will do with modulating the fee for the treatment tax.
Yeah.
That's why we aim first that they modulate the fee of the collection tax.
Fantastic. And I think that's super interesting to hear, because there's these kind of challenges about, you know, costs going up here, down here, and how do you sort of balance it out, and the relationships between the region and the local municipalities. All of this stuff that I think it's so common, the challenges that local municipalities face across Europe for financing this stuff. So thank you for sharing, Victor, about the experiences of the region of Barcelona. Yeah, really, really great way to kickstart this webinar. So I'm going to move on now to our second speaker, Claire de France from SMICVAL. And Claire works at SMICVAL, which is the public sector waste collection and management for the area of an area of about 200,000 inhabitants near Bordeaux in France. And as the director of operations at SMICVAL, Claire participates in the implementation of the different transformations of the service identified and different levels of change within this sort of region in order to obviously reduce waste and change the behaviors of the citizens here. So Claire, I share the floor for you to present.
Okay, thank you. I can share my screen. Okay, it's okay.
Yes, all good. If you want to make it full screen, that'll be perfect.
Okay. Okay, thank you. So that as Jack said, that I'm the director of operation of the SMICVAL. SMICVAL is in charge of collection and treatment of waste in the south of France near Bordeaux, a territory of 138 cities and 200,000 inhabitants. And we collected 1 Eiffel Tower per month, 120,000 tons per year. And we are about 260 employees. I have to present our strategy, the strategy which name is Impact for the Waste Territory Project. And this strategy is from 2020 and to 2030. The purpose is to decrease the waste production from the source. The direction is to participate to the resiliency of the territory through zero waste policy. And the method is to act on the individual and collective change of behavior. For that, we have some targets. The zero waste targets for 2030 are to be about lower than 350 kilograms per year per inhabitants for total waste, and to achieve a maximum of 100 kilograms per year per inhabitants for residual waste. And the other targets are to have zero green waste, zero single-use plastic products, to decrease of 50% of sanitary textiles, 90% of residuals in waste collection sites, and we also wish to work on resources conservation, to maintain even increase local jobs and activities, and encourage social links and change of behavior, as well as local consumption. To summarize, our proposal for the territory that we are in charge is a new style of public policy, from a waste management public policy to a zero waste public policy. For that, we have a lot of evolutions and motions to do, a lot of studies and transformations on public service, organization, technique, finance, and jobs and digital. To summarize, to see our strategy, I propose to you to see a short video about our strategy. So I change my app. Okay, you say if it works.
Citizens of the Libournais and of the Haute-Gironde, it is with no small joy and even a touch of emotion that I invite you to join me on a trip back in time. A little more than half a century ago, when we joined the Impact Project. I can still feel the exhilarating atmosphere of those first days when onlookers were timidly discovering bulk sales shops. Neighbours were delighted to taste together the fruits and vegetables that some grew with the compost from the lawn cuttings of others. Winds of freedom and empowerment were blowing on this wonderful era, where collectively we decided to relocate our activities, to take the gamble to reduce the creation of disposable products, to regard the waste of some as the resource of others, to rethink our beautiful and strong local economy into a circular and cooperative one. What foresight we had to understand those simple and pragmatic solutions, like the returnable glass bottle system, the composting of our organic waste, the pooling of goods or the boycott of planned obsolescence. These were the salvation of our future. Be proud, citizens. You stood together against a production and consumption-driven system, which have made our lives and beautiful untouched countryside a misery. Who can now imagine what the situation would be if we hadn't changed things with common sense and forward thinking when we still had time? Citizens of the...
No. Sorry. Up. Okay, I can continue on my presenter.
Go for it. Thanks, Claire. Lots of nice comments about the video coming in on the chat too.
Okay, thank you. It's okay? I can continue. So
go for it.
As you understand, we have a lot of action to change the behavior of the citizens. And for the fundings for transformations, as Victor says just before, we have some common points. In a short terms, we raise local taxes plus 3% per year, 1 million euro per year, over 34 million euro for total budget. And we do the prioritization of expenses to increase of the part of prevention in the budget. We multiplied the budget by 2 each year for prevention and actions to reduce. At midterm, we have a new waste collection model for important reduction of costs. From door-to-door collection, we go to voluntary disposal with incentive policy, and the reduction is about 6 to 7 million euro per year. And we are doing some structural reforms on technical organization, the expenses of on prevention, waste decrease strategy, tools for reduction, etc. To summarize, we do the creation of a virtuous circle, the increase of local taxes, the decrease of collection costs the new model of collection allows to have more prevention, to decrease the tons of waste and cost of waste treatment. And so we increase financial resources to go on prevention, and so we continue the virtuous circle. And we do other actions about national lobbying to impulse some important decisions. For example, we work for VAT reduction and repairing, reusing. We do some interventions during exchanges concerning ERP for having dedicated funds for prevention, 5% of ERP funds dedicated to solidarity reuse. Different different ERP, furniture, electric waste, textiles, sports, garden. And we have some exchanges in progress to have an ERP about organic matter. We have some issues on carbon markets. The idea of remunerating the positive carbon impact of agriculture to capture CO2 in the soil with the Réseau Compost Plus, we allows. We are putting pressure on local funders to facilitate small-scale local investments, the region and the other public establishments. For example, financial support for local seamstresses instead of investing in new waste treatment plants. And all these actions help to decrease waste with local actors. So I hope I will be clear. Thank you for your attention. And if you have some question, do not hesitate, and you can write to me.
Thank you so much for the super, interesting presentation, and of course the video. We answered that. So a couple of questions for you, Claire, now, if that's okay. Just following that super informative presentation, I guess. There is a question in the Q&A box here for you about the voluntary sort of disposal with incentive policy scheme that SMICVAL is moving to, and what was the reasoning from switching from door-to-door collection to this new scheme? And I don't know, has there been challenges, successes with this so far, or is it still in transition? And then maybe is there any cost data about the two different systems in terms of what's more expensive or cheaper?
Yes, it's a very change of you do some prevention, and after you can reduce waste, and after you have more budget to reduce and change the behavior of the population.
And the voluntary disposal with incentive policy scheme, what are you able to share a little bit about what that specifically is for people living within the SMICVAL territory?
We change all the model of the collection waste. Nowadays, it's a door-to-door model, and we stop all the we will stop all the door-to-door model. And for voluntary, it's first for reduce costs and to be responsible of your production, because if we go curbside your waste, you are not responsible of your waste production. If you go to the voluntary disposal, you are responsible. You pay only the production of waste you do, and it permits to change the behavior of the population.
And do you know yet if this new system will be cheaper or is more expensive for SMICVAL and the municipalities, or it's too early to say?
It's very cheaper because, as I said, it's 6 to 7 million euros of decrease of our budget for technique, and this budget can permit to work on prevention. It's a very important change because you have less transport, so you have less treatment, and after you have more prevention and a best policy.
Absolutely. And a question, so you mentioned that the taxes have been rising a little for the waste fee. Has there been any local opposition to this, or or are the citizens supportive of paying a bit more to focus more on prevention, perhaps?
We do a lot of communication about that because it's a few. There is a lot of increase of the treatment of waste nowadays, and if we don't do anything, the cost will very increase in few years. So it's very important to act now and to change the model. And to change the model, we need to have more money to reduce after, because if we don't act now, we don't have money to change the model, and after the taxes will very increase with an important way for all the population, and it's important to act now.
Yeah, and the population are mostly supportive of this, or is there any opposition that you found when implementing these changes?
Not we have a lot of change because the policy are very mobilized to change the behavior, and we just have the first very important decision of the policy is to have grass cutting and tree leaf forbidden in the waste collection sites from 2022. And it's the first important decision. And after, we have to change model and to explain of all the population why we are doing that. And I think it's a long change of behavior, but the communication, a lot of communication allows to understand why we are doing that, and what will be the increase of the taxes if we don't do that now.
Fantastic. I think it's such a good example of the importance of communicating and bringing the community with you on this journey, and the positive impact that this has. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing. There are more questions, but I think for the sake of time, we will have to move on. One quick question. You said you have 2030 targets, ambitious, 100 kilograms of residual waste, I think it was. Do you know what Smigval is on now at the moment? How far do you have to go in 8 years?
We are very far. We are about 600 kilograms by inhabitants.
Okay, so, fantastic. All right, thank you so much for that.
We study this now, and we will start this year our actions.
We will, look forward to hearing the results, how they go throughout this decade. But thank you so much. It's really great to see the ambition, and thank you for sharing all the information about how Smigval works and the impact policy, of course. So, yes, moving on to our third speaker today of four is Mikko Halonen, and Mikko has an MSc in economics and works at Gaia as a leading consultant, as an expert on sustainable development and inclusive green growth, with a particular focus on mobilizing finance for low carbon, climate resilient development. So we're super happy to have Mikko here today. Through multiple sort of assignments, Mikko has been analyzing the sort of enabling policy environment needed for SDG aligned investment. So the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which Mikko will speak about more, and the role of the public sector in helping to catalyze responsible private sector development and creating really innovative and important private-public partnerships. And so during the past 10 years, Mikko has introduced climate mainstreaming tools for climate screening and proofing of investments and development interventions for different organizations, and water management, energy production and transmission, and transport and agriculture as well. So not just focusing on waste too. So Mikko, we're very grateful and lucky to have you here today. Thank you so much for joining. And feel free to share your screen and your presentation, and I hand the floor to you.
Here we go. Thank you. thank you for the invitation, and I hope you can see the screen now. Is it okay?
Yes, if you want to put it in full screen mode, it's still in the...
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay.
Lovely.
So thanks for having me, and it's a pleasure to be around. And my personal experience from working on waste issues is already some years back from Sharra landfill in Tirana from Albania. So bear with me. I will have a little bit maybe more higher perspective, looking from the finance perspective, but then I'm sure Jack and Caroline will take us back to the ground. But hopefully my comments will have some use for you and can also give some perspective. But as Victor mentioned, there are no single silver bullets with regards to finance either that would help and make these transformations. And I'm really happy that Claire also highlighted these other aspects, these, let's say, co-benefits or job creation or whatever else we can reach if we do waste management properly. So I will not bother you with my background. I come from a consultancy, and today my idea is to shortly tell highlight a couple aspects, maybe from more international and national level on finance, where it's going, and hopefully also it will flow into zero waste initiatives in the future even more. Then I have a couple examples, experiences of kinds of projects where we have been involved, and I try to highlight the finance lessons learned from those initiatives or projects where we have had the possibility to work, and many of them are projects where my colleagues have been hands-on working, but I will try to answer if you have questions. And then in the end, I will try to summarize a couple highlights from what I think could be useful overall. But if we look at the overall finance sector, where it is going, so this is the kind of picture that we have been using during the past five years, more or less, when we speak with the cities, with companies, with NGOs, so that they recognize their own role and maybe place on this finance spectrum. And what we try to communicate with this image is that we need to push the overall bulk of finance more to the right in this picture. Sometimes we say that we don't have enough funds and financing for greener investments. And sometimes we say that there is a huge gap, but actually there is a huge amount of funding waiting just to be geared in the right direction. So we just need to find the right kinds of projects and right kinds of incentives so that we go in the right direction. And the second aspect is that there is a huge amount of initiatives, and countries and regions are developing funding strategies so that they could gear exactly the funding more towards more sustainable incentives. And of course, the European EU taxonomy and sustainable finance is one of the examples, but there are many other initiatives in Europe and other parts of the world. With that background, I would like to highlight 3-4 examples, and hopefully they will spur some questions and discussion today. And this first project, it's an example of a city in Finland. It's work where we have been working with waste treatment facilities, and they are trying to find new ways to move into circular economy approaches. And this is a recent project from a city in Finland called Tampere. It's not a big city, but I think between 100,000 and 200,000 citizens. And one of maybe 2 highlights from that process is that working with that organization, we try to look at how could they turn into circular economy businesses. And one of the core objectives and key bottlenecks that we needed to address was that let's create a vision for this treatment facility, the operators. Where do they want to be in 2030? And what are the business models that actually would give them the possibility to operate with profit, but also with the right kind of SDG impacts related to zero waste plans, and also with regards to the right kind of waste treatment hierarchies. And the other aspect definitely from that work that my colleagues have highlighted is that you need to, if you want to create a vision and really make it implementable, then you need to engage all the key stakeholders that are producing the waste, that can be part of the business models and part of the solutions. So there have been NGOs, companies, municipality people, and so forth involved in that process, in going in the right direction, and in particular to look at what kind of funding should be made available. Then I chose a couple Nordic examples, because the Nordic region often boasts by saying that it's one of the best regions with regards to sustainable development goals. And in many cases that's true, but at the same time, the Nordic countries have extremely high footprints, and many of those footprints are externalized to other countries. So that's also one of the reasons why the Nordics try to focus on circular economy solutions. And this project, so far it's ongoing still, but it has so far learned us that to do it well, you need to have good information, good data, so that you can actually track and set the targets and track that you're going in the right direction. And that gives then also the incentives for private sector and funding agencies to make that money available, because then you know that, okay, we are reaching some results and we can show and track the results. But of course, then here you will run into challenges related to GDPR or ownership of data. But at the same time, there is a huge amount of information with regards to product footprints or tracking possibilities for different kind of waste streams. And you just need to then bring that together in a way that where the transaction costs are not too high. And this has also then highlighted to our team that in particular with regards to waste prevention, you need to be able to really work outside of silos and departments if you want to have that data work for circular solutions. And then a little bit another example. This is a couple of years back already. It's okay. You can address waste challenges by creating new green growth opportunities, circular opportunities. But of course, the other way, as in energy sector, is cost savings. And this is just an example that we tracked from Iceland a couple of years ago as part of a Nordic and UNEP UN projects. Just by working on better public procurement, there were massive or major savings that could be made with regards to waste streams. And then also the municipality had the possibility to invest further in greener solutions. And then I will conclude with one final example, and this is even more than linked with regards to business development and new perspectives. Of course, to create circular economy business opportunities in waste sector also, you need to identify and go to the source. What kind of challenges do we have? Make use of latest research, and then you need to get that information and the collaboration with the public and private sector going. And it doesn't happen on its own. You need to have platforms that facilitate that. Just like we have here one webinar by Zero Waste facilitated, but you need to have those platforms. It doesn't happen. Otherwise, it happens occasionally here and there. And what is extremely important is all the time think about what are the business opportunities, or at least what are the payback solutions. How will you get that money? Because you need to invest. When will you get it back, and how? And there is a lot of speaking about public-private partnerships and blended finance, blending public and private finance often quite too much. Actually, it means just coming to the same table, speaking about who can best do what, and if public finance is limited, then you need to find a way to mobilize the private sector, private expertise. But you need to also be clear about what you expect from the private sector. And I'm sure we will hear a little bit more soon about impact bonds or whether you can do this through tax incentives and other issues. So these 4 examples. Hopefully they were not on a too high level, but when we have been working on finding finance for sustainable transformations, often we run into these kinds of 4 or 5 elements that we have used also in the roadmap here in Finland. So you need to really understand this element. 1 is that in the case of waste management, what is the real problem? Where is it? You need to have really your hand and feet on the ground. What is the challenge that you're trying?
You might have lost Mika.
Ever, but you need to start from the real problem. And then this 3rd element just refers to the fact that you need to have a home base. Like we had from Claire explaining, she is a home base for the solutions, but a home base that drives these waste management solutions to the end and is there to learn from the process and ready to upscale and duplicate the processes. And then it's extremely important, at least our experience from the past 10 years, is that already from the beginning, you understand what are the impacts of what you're doing. And you need to be able to communicate about the impacts, SDG impacts, the benefits, the job benefits. Sometimes you can have also those climate benefits. You can, create biogas, you can have carbon sinks, you can have many other things, and also sometimes find financing for it. So to communicate about, because that gives clarity, and also the funding agencies want to have that. And then finally, at the core of everything is the expertise and knowledge and capacities of people. And this is a forum where you have the kind of expertise, and also there needs to be expertise of how to lobby whenever needed to change standards or regulations, because sometimes they don't make sense. Sometimes they are really helpful for getting bigger investments, because sometimes you need bigger investments for bigger infrastructure and solutions. So thanks for bearing with me. It's a little bit maybe off the ground, but I try to present the lessons learned that we have from water sector, from education sector, from energy sector, and these are maybe on a more general level. But I'm sure Jack and Caroline, you will take us back to the waste sector and to the details. So I thank you, and I stop sharing the screen.
No, Mika, thank you so much. I think some of the lessons that you sort of highlighted there in the middle about from the 3 or 4 different projects, I think is super relevant and applicable else, for other actors, all of us working in this field, about how can we make these partnerships more effective? How can we access more different sources of financing? A couple of questions, Mika, for you maybe, and then we'll bring on Caroline for the final sort of presentation. But there's a question from Beverly, and I think it's super important. There was one of the examples you mentioned about data and the need for clear data being really key. And when you sort of work in this field of circular economy and you're consulting, what kind of data metrics are you suggesting municipalities collect, focusing on the circular economy, apart from maybe just residual waste generation or recycling tonnages? Are there any sort of other metrics that you think are critical for really important financial and also impact?
I don't dare to go into very much detail, because like I said, 10 years ago, I was at the Shara landfill. But lots of data is available, either with regards to the products that end up there, with regards to their footprints. There are possibilities to follow. There is more and more sensor data, digital data, tagging technologies and so forth. And these kinds of data we are working on when we work with businesses who want to become circular economy players, but many of them are still far away from practical use, and maybe from the kind of use or maybe answers you're looking for this webinar. Sorry, I don't have a better answer now.
No, not at all. I think the metrics around the circular economy, we could have a whole separate 90-minute webinar on, indeed, and mention it. But Mika, one other question for you. You mentioned public-private partnerships there, so the PPPs. From your experience, what is the kind of role that municipalities, local level municipalities, can play in these? Should they be the ones seeking these partnerships, or is it more at the national, regional level? Have you had experiences of local authorities being actively involved in such partnerships?
The ones that I have worked are maybe more related to the water sector and wastewater treatment. And there, for instance, in Finland, there are public-private partnerships that are being developed, and they are using the kinds of impact bonds approaches. So where they are bringing in the public sector is setting the stage, but then the private sector you have a very formulated task for the private sector, who then can bring in its expertise and coordination skills, so that actually in many cases you find the incentive for prevention. So cost reduction, it can be wastewater reductions, but in the waste management sector, you can find a good incentive for prevention. So the private sector gets benefits only when it manages to reduce waste streams. But then there is the incentive really to go all the way. You don't need to keep on funding in vain, or you don't have the incentives in the wrong direction.
Yeah. Okay. Mikko, thank you so much for that sort of overview of the different financing models and systems available, and some of the key lessons learned from your experience and work in this. It's super valuable. So, but with that, let's move on to our fourth and final speaker, Caroline Coulier, the New Financing Models Coordinator at Zero Waste Europe here. And Caroline has worked in various different environments in different countries and a diverse range of topics, from the public to the private sectors, building businesses from scratch, and always driven by the necessity for act for good. And but currently within Zero Waste Europe, Caroline works with us to identify new financing models that can help further our impact as an organization and our sort of accelerate really the wider sort of European shift towards zero waste. And I think sort of we mentioned it there, Mikko, very nicely about impact bonds, and Caroline will speak about that in more detail. Let me just share my screen, Caroline.
Thank you for sharing, Jack.
Go for it.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Mikko, for kind of an indirect presentation. My name is Caroline Coulier. I am the New Financing Models Coordinator at Zero Waste Europe, as Jack mentioned, and I will talk about a new financial mechanism called Social Impact Bond. I started looking at Social Impact Bond last year as I was investigating into new financial models looking to fund effective zero waste solutions with the potential to scale fast and adapt to different environments. You can go to slide 2, please. Thank you. So what's important to keep in mind is that social impact bonds are supposed to fund effective social services. It was born in 2010, and the good news is that social impact bonds are still very adjustable, I would say, and flexible as an instrument. A social impact bond enables us to test out innovative concepts and ways of doing things that are mostly geared to problem prevention. So a social impact bond is basically a tripartite contract between a public sector, social providers, for example, as Zero Waste Europe, and private investors. It is not a bond per se, which is something very important to keep in mind, because repayment and return on investment are contingent upon the achievement of desired social incomes. And for your information, and I think it's important to know that both public sector and private sector organizations can issue them. Investors, especially the investors that are driven for impact or with impact, have been really interested in this new mechanism, which is a good news for us, because it gives them a sense of responsibility investing back in the community. You can go to slide 3, please. One of the key aspects of a social impact bond is that it brings upfront capitals and therefore transfer the risk to private investors. We know for a fact now that most of private sector is unlikely to get return on investment by investing in zero waste projects that are implemented at a local level. And that is why social impact bond could help accelerate the transformation by, again, transferring the risk to private investors, still providing the outcome funders the guarantee to pay based on its achievements and performance. So as I was kind of introducing, is that it drives better outcomes and cost efficiency. It optimizes risk allocation by, again, transferring the risk to private investors. It delivers benefits at scale. You have the capacity also to implement a social impact bond mechanism at a bigger scale than a regular investment. And it generates ecosystem benefits because the partners are fully committed and engaged towards the outcomes. And one of the key aspects of social impact bond is that it fosters flexibility and grow evidence for innovation. What does it mean? It means that basically a social impact bond, you have to structure it around a time frame between 3 years and 5 years. It depending on how do you think the first outcome will come out to be positive. So, for example, you identify a solution, which in the social impact bond frame you call program, and you need 10 million to fund this solution to make it work. So usually you have to know that a social impact bond range between 1 million up to 30 million. You can say, listen, to the investors, listen, we sign on a 3 years frame for a social impact bond. You invest 3 million now, and in 14 months from now, I can show you the first positive outcomes. Then you have the possibility to kind of fragment the different financial phases. And if it works, they have the potential to reinvest, to give the final amount that they agreed on, but also to reinvest on an ongoing basis on the outcomes that are working. So it's actually give the flexibility to at a financial level. It helps also to increase the risk for investors, and also it allows you to change the solution if it's not working. For example, if solution A that you invested in doesn't work in the 14-month frame, you can say, okay, it hasn't worked, but I have another solution, then I can transfer the fundings on this solution. So I would say that one of the great aspects of the social impact bond is that you have this capacity to be flexible, either on the financial part, but also on the solution that you finance. Slide 4. So we're going to dive a little bit into the zero rate business case, because I think it's always nicer to have a clear business case on what's going on. So we can move forward, Jack. Thanks. So what we wanted to do by identifying a new financial mechanism is basically we wanted to have the capacity to fund solutions that can be scaled at a European level at a fast pace, and that also have the capacity to adapt into different environments. We know that cities and municipalities are looking to transition to zero waste. Most of them are either a bit afraid to take the leap or don't have the necessary fundings. So we don't want them to have to prioritize. And we know, again, that they need this flexibility and independence when it comes to financing options. So we decided to call this bond and to create a zero waste bond. Everyone understands a zero waste bond, at least most of the people in this topic. And we know that this zero waste bond can favor a common narrative. We want to make sure that all the fundings that we get are going towards the right solutions and not the false solutions, which is mostly the case these days. We want to allow also to create financial archetypes. What does it mean? When you have a solution, the hard part is to find quantitative data and to make sure that you can create an average. If you find solution A to be the good solution, you need to make sure that you know how much it's going to cost, what are the cost savings behind, what are the metrics that you can measure. And this average can help to scale solutions, again, in different types of environments. Third is that for us and for most of the people that are looking into social impact bond, it really closes the gap between the institutional level that you're working at and the grassroots level that you are, meaning how do you implement the solutions that you can actually fund. One of the key aspects also was for us to be more a pioneer in bringing this zero waste topic to a more social issue. We wanted to make sure that we measure social impact. It is completely embedded in the circular economy. And we have found out in many different studies that the way we manage our waste also impact our social environment. And so metrics can be such as creating a decent jobs, more sustainable environment, better educated people, community resilience, or health issues. So it could be really more broad. And finally, to open also the gate to other organizations that could also, if they want to issue a bond on their specific topic. So slide 5, I'm gonna we're gonna dive into who are the key stakeholders and actors, and what do they do basically in a social impact bond if tomorrow you would like to build a social impact bond. So pragmatically, you have, I would say, I think 5 or 6 key stakeholders. Obviously, you have the social provider, in that case, us, would be Zero Waste Europe, who usually has identified the problem, like the issue or the social issue. Then this coordinator is going to make sure to bring the stakeholders together in order to address this problem. And in terms of stakeholders, you need impact investors. They are going to be the ones who bring the upfront capital. And you need to have an outcome funder. So you have to work simultaneously because both bring legitimacy. If you have a good outcome funder, meaning that the funders will pay back the investors, the investment, if the outcomes are reached, it's really important. And usually there are foundation, big national government or national institutions that make it very solid and very legit. After, you have to rely, obviously, on a great network of implementers. These people are going to be responsible for implementing the solution that the funders invested in, and they're going to be also in charge of make it work. And then you have one of the key and final stakeholder is the independent, very important, outcome evaluators. So when you structure a social impact bond, you create a monitoring, evaluating frame, and this is what is going to make sure that the outcomes are actually reached, and this is how the investors get paid back. So you need the evaluator to make sure that actually is independent, because obviously everyone needs to win in this, but it still needs to be no conflict of interest when it comes to evaluating the results. We can go back if you want, because there's definitely the actors and the actions. So I don't know how much time I have, but if you have questions on this specific scheme, you can ask questions after that. We can move to the other slide. I thought it was important to say that why also the traditional funding sources might be not the best way to scale these solutions on the market is because we have very few incentives with traditional funding. Basically, we were mentioning it earlier with PPP. It can work, and you will see in the slide after this one that it is a potential solution, but the business model of private companies are definitely reliant on a continued generation of waste to stay in business. The second thing is the upfront capital. We mentioned it, and that is one of the key features of a social impact bond. And third, but not the least, is it's a huge risk for cities and municipalities to invest in a solution that has not been proven and where cross knowledge between countries or regions do not work and do not necessarily share the best practice. And so it is a process that hampers the scaling process. The social impact bond, coming back to what I was saying earlier, allows you to change the solution that you invested in and therefore to experiment if it's working or not, which traditional fundings usually do not allow, or not as much. The slide 8 is just really to give you an overview. You can move on, Jack, thank you. That took an overview of what are basically the current other options for zero waste infrastructure or solutions. It's a very dense table. Maybe I can share it with you if you want to look into it. But basically, the sustainability-linked loans, the first one, aka SDG-linked bond, it's a loan. It's a basic loan with favorable rates if you reach the outcomes, but you need to pay regardless. So it's not like a social impact bond where the outcomes are repayment-based. The second one is theme use of proceed bonds. So you have social bond, green bonds, sustainability bond, environmental municipal bond. I'm sure you heard about it. Here you are in a more traditional, I would say, bond. It's not a contract between a tripartite contract. Investor buy the bond, and there is no repayment or incentive, which are conditional on outcomes. And the third, but not the least, are performance-based contracts. So they need a clear set of objectives and indicators. You need to collect data on the progress of the selected indicators, and the consequences is either a reward or sanctions for the contractor based on performance. So there are absolutely no loan or investment investment involved. I know it's a lot because it's very technical. I'm really trying to make it short and I can ask any questions, but this was a brief summary on why social impact bond could be a solution or should be maybe considered to fund a zero waste transition. Thank you very much.
Amazing. Thank you, Caroline, so much for that. Yeah, super interesting and exciting sort of development in the world of financing waste at the local level. And I think the purpose of this webinar, we've tried to cover sort of the current financing models through waste fees, collection fees, and EPR schemes, to look at an overview of the different potential partnerships and other fundings, and to introduce the potential of this new social impact bond. And Caroline, maybe, well, first of all, let me remind everyone to submit your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom here. If you have questions, we have 13 minutes left, so we'll try to get through as many as possible for Caroline and for our 3 other speakers. But maybe, Caroline, quickly for you, many municipalities or local officials will say, okay, a social, the name bond maybe is quite scary, the big sort of technical financial meaning behind it. But what would you say to municipality to sort of reassure them that this is the right thing to do? And sort of, if they are interested, what would be the kind of the next steps, I suppose?
Well, I think that the first step for municipalities, I would say, is to really identify the solution that they want to invest in, like what they feel it's necessary for them to take a first step in the zero waste transition, and then to make sure that they could become also the outcome payer. Municipalities and cities have the capacity to substitute and to actually be the outcome payer and say, listen, we're going to see private investors. This is what we need in order for our city or municipality to upgrade or to really take the leap in zero waste transition. We need that much money. Are you willing to ship in? And we are sure that we can pay. So I think they are actually, there's an advantages for them to actually go see the investors directly. And if you have multiple cities or municipalities interesting, they should come all together and also make an outreach to their national government to ask the national government to actually be the outcome payer. So I think it might actually be easier for them. And
yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So there is a question here about the interest for the zero waste bonds from investors themselves. And so, you know, what are the incentives for businesses and investors to be involved from your experiences working on this?
Well, I think there are multiple. First of all, as I was saying, I think most investors right now call themselves investors with impact or for impact. I think it's really important for them to have the feeling that they are financing sustainable changes in our society and environment. Most of investors are very pragmatic, meaning that they know by investing in sustainable solutions, they are also investing in the future of other solutions that they might invested in. And I think it also gives them a sense of being socially and community oriented. And it's not something that should be just put aside. I think it's very important. Usually the return on investment in a social impact bond is, I would say, a bit low because it's maybe 3-4%. It doesn't look like it's huge, but it's something that the risk is, I mean, it's an insurance because you have an outcome payer, so they don't take as much risk as a regular investment. And again, it really allowed them to integrate an environment that they have not been in before. And also they have the capacity also to bridge with other stakeholders, more public stakeholders, which sometimes is not that easy for private investors.
Definitely. Yeah. So lots to digest and sort of get our heads around there, but I think it's super interesting and exciting to see the future sort of trends going here. So thank you, Caroline. And maybe, yeah, we have 10 minutes left. I'll invite the sort of other speakers to virtually rejoin back to the panel. But Victor, a question for you, coming to you first. Well, first of all, an opportunity to reflect on what everyone else has said and presented. But there is a question here from Victor, another Victor, about the accessibility, I suppose, to the data for costs and about waste management or other sort of schemes. And you provided a lot of data in your presentation, but the cost of different collection schemes, is there much available data, and is it publicly available, I suppose, from the area of Barcelona, or do you struggle to get accurate data in this kind of topic?
Yeah, that's a question that we very often get. we have some data on the current existing systems, but we have a little bit of lack of knowledge in the implementation of door-to-door collection schemes, and especially on smart bins, because smart bins is a developing technology, and it's difficult to say which kind of collateral effects it will have. For instance, in abandoning bags of the technical performance, will they be online all the day, or there will be a lot of problems, technical problems, so on. So yeah, we have some information in case someone needs it.
Great. And sorry, Victor, go on.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, sorry, I thought I interrupted you, but don't worry. Thank you for that. So Claire, maybe a similar question for you at SMICVAL in terms of the accessibility for data around costs, and whether does the relationship change for you as the waste management company between and working with municipalities, or is there sort of good flow of data and information coming from these different levels?
I'm not sure I understand all the question.
No, don't worry, it's complicated. For SMICVAL, do you have easy access to finance data from your territory, or is it harder to access quality data on the financing and the costs of the different waste management systems?
Sorry, I don't understand all the question. Caroline, you can help me.
L'idée, c'est de savoir est-ce que vous avez un budget pour un petit peu accumuler les data au sujet du Jack, it's on a specific topic, or it's on a general data, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Si vous avez un budget qui est dédié pour réunir en fait toutes les data autour de vos actions, autour de ce que vous faites.
Yes, we follow all the towns and all the action we done about vegetables. I speak to you to reduce vegetables, and we change the place we treat the materials and the plants, and we can follow the towns. For the data, we have specific server. To have all the data from all the different actors, we goes on this server to have all the data. Sorry.
No problem. Huh? So, so thank you, Claire. Miko, coming to you maybe next. A question about sort of how you see the future funding landscapes, I suppose, in terms of waste, but broadly SDG, circular economy strategies. How do you see it changing over the coming sort of 5 to 10 years?
Maybe I could start from the region where I mostly work in the Nordics. Like I mentioned, there is a huge challenge in the massive footprints, and the Nordic consumption is really high, using natural resources well beyond one planet. So I think for that reason, the Nordics really try to find ways to not only, with limited city or state budgets, they try to involve the private sector. And there are a couple of good questions from Günther and David at the chat also. You really need to have the skills to engage the private sector in the right way, but the private sector needs to have the incentives to get on board. So for that reason, it's really we here in the webinar have to be in the driver's seat, understanding what zero waste management means, what are the objectives, what are the indicators that we aim at, and thereafter you can find the right instruments and incentives to get the private sector on board. And it's simply because the changes needed are so massive, and the pace that we need to do this transformation is so massive that we need to get the private sector, of course, involved. And this is not just my opinion, it's the SDG community understands that we need to get the private sector on board, but in the right way. And like Caroline mentioned, the finance sector is really eager to look for impacts. They want to have the profit, but they want to increasingly have profit with impact. So in that sense, even if it sounds like I'm flying in the stratosphere or high in the clouds, this is the big picture and it's going in the right direction. But then together with your colleagues, you need to be able to identify in detail what is the problem, what is the waste management challenge that you need to address, and how to get the private sector involved. And some parts of it will be public goods forever, probably. But in some areas you need, and you can get the private sector on board, but you need to be in the driver's seat so that you define what are the impacts that you want to reach. Sorry, a little bit politics almost, but this has been an inspiring session, and also thank you, Victor and Claire, for being concrete and telling about what's happening on the ground.
Thank you, Mika. I think that's a really important lesson for us to remain in the driving seat, but to engage these kind of private sector actors from a position of power. Then, Caroline, final question. There is one in the Q&A about the zero waste bonds. Is there any information materials publicly available? And perhaps maybe in 1 minute you could sort of share the specific next steps for you working on this and how others could.
It's a fair question. We will put some details on the website. We already have. Maybe we can share. I can share. Like there is a quick page that explains what we're doing, and we hope to edit actually a scheme on the stakeholders. And the next step is now we are actually looking into private investors. So this is where we are now. This is the phase. We finished the first phase of assessment. We know that what type of solutions we would like to go for, and which is. Honestly, it was a very interesting assessment to do, because you really dive into the heart of a social impact bond and what really needs to function. So it was really fascinating. If you like kind of like geeky topics, I will encourage you to just dive into it. It's really fun. So we will share very soon as soon as we have investors, since for now we're talking more at a private level. But as soon as we have something more in detail, it will be on our website. Yes, but I'm more than happy to talk privately if there is anyone interested in potentially doing it at their level. We're happy to share.
Thank you so much. And yes, all the presentations will be available on the Zero Waste Cities website. So for those who want to go back to it. And so, yes, it comes down to me to say a final sort of thank you to our four amazing speakers, Victor, Claire, Mika, and Caroline. Thank you so much for giving up your time to present for today. Thank you all, everyone, for joining as well. And everyone is super busy, and there's a lot of sort of challenging stuff happening in the world. So thank you for joining today and being present. Happy International Women's Day as well to everyone. Let's acknowledge that and continue to sort of fight for a fair and just world. Final sort of reminders from us. We'll be sending out an audience survey from Zero Waste Europe. It would be wonderful if you could take 2 minutes to fill in that. It will help inform our future communications and webinar topics as well. On the Zero Waste Cities website, you will find 2 important links. One is to the tools section, where you'll find the presentations from today's speakers and many more resources. We have also the Zero Waste Cities newsletter, which you can sign up for to get all the latest information about our upcoming webinars and future work as well. For example, the next webinar is looking at the non-toxicity of products and packaging, which is really important to a prerequisite basically for achieving a circular economy and protecting our health, and why this is so important and how can we achieve that. That is on the 5th of April, same time, 2 p.m. Central European time. So yes, I look forward to speaking with lots of you then. Hopefully, thank you so much for joining. Thank you again to the panelists for your excellent contributions. And wish everyone a good day, good evening, and stay safe during these times. Thank you all.
Thank you.